Namaste and welcome to the spiritual aspects of Agnihotra, 16th session. We have been discussing the very beginning of the Agnihotra, that process, after the Achman and Angisparsh. So last week we were talking in terms of just before Agnihotra, or the mantra that we use to ignite the fire, so that we have a ready source of fire, and that mantra is Bhuh Bhuvah Svah. So there are three names for Paramatma: Bhuh Bhuvah Svah, preceded by Om. So we have discussed at length this number 3, which is very common in the Agnihotra, and we said that, of course, number 3 many people relate with. There are 3 causeless entities in the universe: myself, consciousness, and consciousness of Ishwar, and Prakriti. But basically it is Purush and Prakriti, and Purush has consciousness. Prakriti is, it gives rise to all sorts of transformation, while Purush remains as it is, and it possesses consciousness. Now within Purush, so in terms of Sankhya lists about 25 entities, Purush and then Prakriti, and other 23 are evolutes of Prakriti. But when it comes to Ishwar, as in Yog Darshan, Patanjali describes him as Purush Vishesh Ishwar. So if you like to call it as Ishwar, Jeev and Prakriti, yes, there are 3 entities. But here the number 3 originates from the term Om. That is the own name of Ishwar. And it has 3 sounds inbuilt, namely A, U and Ma. A is at the throat level, U is in between, and the last Ma is lip sound. So this becomes a monosyllable sound in the sense A and U, they give rise to a new vowel O. It's not quite a new vowel, it is a combination, compound vowel of A and U. So in Sanskrit grammar, whenever there are 2 vowels together, it gives rise to a modified compound vowel. Otherwise, 2 vowels close to each other cannot remain unaffected. They must get modified. So, though the sound is Om, it looks like there is one vowel O followed by Ma, but actually built-in sound is A, U and Ma. So that has 3 sounds, and that is the origin of number 3 that we will see very often in the Agnihotra. And as it occurs right soon thereafter, 3 names for that Ishwar, namely Bhuh, Bhuvah and Svah. So 3 number has many other connotations besides Ishwar, Jeev and Prakriti. Like Sankhya begins with Trivid Dukhantyante Niveti. Three categories of pain and suffering. What is called Adhyatmic, Adhi Bhautik, and Adi Daivik. But here we will follow what we expect to see from Agnihotra. These are three names of Ishwar, namely Bhuh, Bhuvah, and Svah. So right in Satyat Prakash's first chapter, Maharishi Dayanand lists 100 plus names for Ishwar, and he says that that is the classical Vedic tradition, that all names are merged within this three names, three sounds of A, U, Ma. So A stands for, as he writes in Satyat Prakash, A signifies Vidyut, Agni, and Vishwa, and etc. Many more names. U stands for Hiranyagarbha, Vayu, Tejas, and so on. And Ma stands for, includes Ishwar, Aditya, Prajna, etc., etc. So basically the sound is as if it is initiation, giving birth to something. U is sustenance, and Ma, as the lips are closing, it is end of it. So that signifies three distinct characteristics of Ishwar insofar as this universe is concerned, where we live, where we are brought into existence as a human being or any other conscious living beings. So his characteristics to give birth to the universe is signified in A, and in U, his ability to sustain the universe, and in Ma, his ability to dissolve it for recycling purpose so that he can build it again next time. So everything is brought back to rest. All the particles are brought back to rest, and then next cycle of universe again A, U, Ma. So that A stands for, as we have seen, Vidyut, Agni, and Vishwa, etc. U stands for Hiranyagarbha, Vayu, Tejas, and Ma stands for Ishwar, Aditya, Prajna, etc. So as if our classical Vedic rishis, they made a table of three columns, and then they evaluated all the names of Ishwar and see whether the dominating characteristics is close to A, or is close to U, or is close to Ma. And accordingly, they placed all the Ishwar's name in one of these three columns. So that probably we'll see as we proceed. Now the same column, as if the very first three names appearing in those three columns would be Bhuh Bhuvah Svah. And I think that gives us a hint. In Agnihotra we have Bhuh Agnaye Pranaya Swaha. So as we saw the list, Agni comes in the column 1 with A, and Bhu is also there, and Agni and Pran. Bhuva will be having Vayu and Apan. Swa will have Aditya and Vyan. So in the Agnihotra we will be reciting these mantras. Bhu Agnaye Pranaya Swaha, Bhu Vayave Apanaya Swaha, Swayadityaya Vyanaya Swaha. So the names in the same column have been put together in a particular order. Bhu comes first, then either Agni, Vayu, Aditya, or Pran, Apan, Vyan, and so on and so forth. So Bhu, of course, they are from physical plane, as I pointed out last time. Bhu is the earthly world, the support that we get, and in Sanskrit the word for earth is Bhumi or Bhulok. So three loka are represented by Bhu. Swa is the Suryalok, Aditya, as we see out, and Bhuva is in between, the space in between the earth and the sun. So that is about physical plane, but we are more interested in spiritual aspect. So Bhu means Bhu Sattayam. Bhu is the root of Bhavati. It is signifying existence. So, of course, Ishvara is self-existent. So, Bhu is very much his inherent characteristics. He exists by very own nature. He is not brought into existence by any other cause. He exists very inherently. So that is why he is Bhu, and Bhuva is also taken as one who takes me away from pain and suffering. So as we live in this world, and that is what Vayu does, sustenance. It takes away all the impurities of our body system and fills up with the fresh air, and that force allows us to sustain our life. So Bhuva is taking away all the unwanted stuff, whether it is in our body system or it is in our mind, that would be pain and suffering. So Bhuva is Dukha Rahit. That is how his name is translated. Bhuva is Jagat Utpadak. He is self-existent and as well as brings the whole universe into existence and also us into existence as human being. And when we are born, then naturally, whenever any pain and unwanted thing strikes us, he is the power that removes us from the influence of those pain and suffering. And he is also capable of giving us that sukh and pleasure. That is, his name is Sukh Swarup. So by very inherent nature, he is Ananda Swarup. That's what we mean. Ishvara is Sachidananda Swarup. So there is an interesting part here, and that points towards the objectives of the human life. So this is his very kind virtue that he transmits his three characteristics to us, the human beings. In what way? Of course, at our Purush level, the self, that is consciousness, that is ever existent. But as I have been brought together, bonded with my body and mind instruments, he has somehow, as I was born, deep in my mind domain, there is a instinctive tendencies that we can call a survival instinct. So as he sent me into this world, he has programmed my mind with sufficient strength of survival. So, I don't have to think hard when it comes to survival. If there is a huge fire nearby or a bomb explosion or whatever it is, there is danger to my life, then very instinctively I run away from the dangers to my life to save myself, because that is very much inbuilt within us, the tendency, jijivisha, jijivishe satam sama. So he has planted it in deep in my mind, that what we call survival instinct. So he has packed me with enough of the power that gives rise to survival instinct. And he is, of course, absolute sense he is Bhuva. In the sense, no pain and suffering can ever strike him. But we are ordinary people. We do get caught with unwanted pain and suffering. And then also he has programmed us with certain instinctive force that if there is something painful, of course, death is very painful. That's what leads to survival instinct. But in general, we are blessed with some instinctive forces that if there is something painful, I want to get away from it. If my finger touches something hot, a flame or anything which is very hot, no, I don't evaluate and think and decide. Very automated, a reflex-like function. I remove my finger from that hot substance or flame or whatever it was. So even a child would do that, though we might not have given that education to that child, because that is very instinctive. Of course, this instinct is slightly weaker than the survival instinct, but it is there. And that's what we see, that he is so kind. When he sends me into this world, he gives away. And in his giving away, there is no deficiency on his part. His characteristics of Bhu and Bhuva, to me to a certain extent, that I exhibit them in my day-to-day life behavior. That's where I take a clue that maybe he will share his Swah also with me. Indeed, that's what he says, that he has shared his Bhu and Bhuva with us, with all of us, more or less as default. And then he says, if you are sensible enough, and if you connect with me, then I can share my Swaha also with you, is it not? So this is something like, Bhu is very much when I am in Jagrat Avastha, when I am awake, Bhuva is something when I am in deep sleep, Sushupti. That is a very peculiar state. Otherwise, 24 hours, I may experience some painful experiences or restless mind, agitated, disturbed mind. But when I am in deep, dreamless sleep, no dreams, nothing happening in my mind, then there is absolutely no recollection of any pain and suffering, is it not? So, Sushupti is a state of ours when I am really like 100% Bhuva, as if he has shared his Bhuva with me to fullest extent, is it not? So that similar sharing is to the fullest extent when I am in deep in meditation, that is counterpart of Sushupti called Samadhi. So that's why Kapil in Sankhya puts these two states at par. Sushupti Samadhi Moksheshu Brahmrupta. So as if I am in his lap, Sushupti is as default. Since our childhood we have been experiencing it. But this is a bit discretionary. Not everybody gets it by default. One can make an effort in this direction. And between Sushupti and Samadhi, the difference is, yes, in both cases, I am untouched by pain and suffering. But here in Sushupti, I am not having real-time taste of his swaha. Whereas in Samadhi, I have the real-time taste of it. That swaha, what is called Param Sukha. So, in spiritual sense, Bhuh Bhuvah Svah are three names of this same entity, and these names are part and parcel of this pranav. This sound is called as pranav or Udgit. This is his supreme primary name. All other names are merged somehow, one way or another, in this name. So, Bhuh Bhuvah Svah takes us along three different directions, and we have seen that it is his kindness that he shares Bhu with us to a large extent, that shows up in us as survival instinct. He shares with us Bhuva to a slightly lesser extent when I am in wakeful state, Jagyat Avastha. But this sharing is 100% when I am in Sushupti, deep, dreamless sleep. And similarly, he is open to me. He will share this with me. There is no hiding. There is no step backward from his side, provided I can connect with him in real-time mode, in conscious mode. In sleep, I am unconscious. I am not aware that I am with him. But here I become aware of I am with him. So we have seen the three names of this. And this also reflects, as we are igniting the fire, three levels of fire. Who is the fire on the earth? That is what Samhita is. We will be using it for the Agnihotra. Bhuva is the fire in the space, that is called Vidyut. When clouds strike, then that also gives rise to fire. And this fire, we have discussed last week, when two pieces of wood are made to strike one against another, then a spark gets created, and that is the source of the fire. And so is the fire in the sun, that is actually fireball. So we have seen it in the context of fire also. And it is interesting to see the importance of sun, and that's what we will be seeing in the next month. Bhuh and Prithivi. So Bhuh is a self-burning, the light is Swapakash Swarup. So the sun has its own light, whereas we know moon doesn't have its own light, it merely reflects the light of the sun. And if we are on the moon somehow, then we will see that the earth is also reflecting the light of the sun. So the earth is making a dipole with the sun, Dhyava Prithivi. Bhuh is the sun, and in its image, the Prithvi can also act as reflect the light. But here we will see an interesting part, that the Samhita, that is capable of releasing fire, because it has energy, it is a kind of cellulose fuel. Cellulose fuel are basically, having carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen atoms. So as opposed to hydrocarbons that are only carbon and hydrogen atoms. So cellulose, like sugar or alcohol, they have embedded oxygen atom also. So because oxygen atoms are embedded, their calorific value is slightly less. So to say, they are already partly oxidized, So as compared to hydrocarbons, like say methane, which is CH4, the cellulose fuel have less heat release, what is called calorific value per gram of fuel. Typical hydrocarbons release 10 kilocalorie per gram of fuel, 10,000 calories per gram of fuel. But cellulose may release about 3,000 calories per gram of fuel. So wood is like a cellulose fuel. But whatever is its calorific value, the energy content, actually that has come from the sun only. So it is very interesting in Ishwar's creation that during the daytime he gives us daylight from the sun, but late in the evening, when it is darkness, then human beings can still generate light if they know the science of friction, and that of course only human beings do it. Animals don't care, and that's why we only do Agnihotra. So Agni is there in the sun, and it is there also in the Samhita. So basically Samhita's Agni has been borrowed from the sun only, but it becomes like a storehouse of energy that human being can use it at their will as per their need, is it not? So we have Samidha, that is nothing but part of the sun and is grown on the earth, and that's what is reflected in the next mantra. Om Bhuh Bhuvah Svah. This is repetition of that. Then that it is addressed to that Supreme Being, Om, that you means as if you are. Likewise. So you are like Diyo, Swapakash Swayu, physical light, and of course also the light of knowledge also. Bhumna, you have a lot of, what should I say? Bhumna is like, looking at a translation by Maharishi Dayananda. Bhumna is all your great virtues. You know what? Dewlok has it. What dew has it. And also Bhumna can mean Ashvaya. All that is your possessions. So dew is Swapakash Soyu, as we have seen. The light that is there is due to fusion, wherever the heat generated on the earth is primarily due to fission. And oxidation of fuel, like coal and hydrocarbon. Coal is pure carbon. Hydrocarbon are all these petroleum products, and their derivatives are alcohol and other products that are also with some embedded oxygen atom. So all that great virtues of dew are held by, so Prithivi here means smaller addition of dew. It preserves the characteristics of dew. Like electricity is, we have all that continuous electricity on our wall. We have sockets, we can plug in various gadgets, and we get electricity, which is coming from the power plant direct. But then we are wanting to use some portable systems where we want flexibility of without wire and cables and all that. So then we use batteries. So a battery is storing the electrical energy to some extent. That also basically came from power plant, but it has the ability to store it. So one is the continuous flow of electricity, and another is the electrical batteries that store that electrical power in a limited sense. So you can look at it, Dev and Prithivi, in the same manner, as if this is almost infinite source of energy, but this is finite source of energy as and when I want it. And Vaimna is from the word Vaya is Sheshta, Vayana. So this is also with all the positive attributes to a lesser extent, but as if. So what we are seeing is the beauties in the Dewlok, which has enormous powers, and then to a smaller extent in our EG each, whatever is on the Prithivi, it is in our EG each. And it may be to a smaller extent, but it is makes our life convenient. Whenever we want it, we can get the source of energy. So dew can be viewed as reflecting the sun, whereas this reflects the samhita, which is also a smaller addition of this. And then we are saying both these members of these two dipoles, dew and Prithivi, because here also that term U is there. So dew and Prithivi are being seen as a reflection of the Supreme Consciousness. This is your design. This is the original light. That's what is seen in dew, and that's what is stored in Prithivi for our later consumption, later use. And now, in the second part, tasyaste. These characteristics of yours, they is you. Now we are specifically looking at Prithivi, the earth's surface that I am on, where I want to establish this Agni. So Pisth is on its surface very much. Is it not? Dev Yajani and Pisth both are what is called Saptami. Saptami would mean what in English grammar? Genitive and then locative. Yeah, locative case. So this is locative case for both. So on the earth's surface, where devatas do their yajna, on that surface, I want to establish this fire. And it is Annadam. So that goes with Agnim. Agnim is characterized as Annadam. Very interesting. Agni is that energy, and that energy which is with the Om gets transferred to the sun, gets transferred to the earth. So we have discussed this samhita, but there is another way that all the sun's energy is absorbed by vegetation, what is called anna, the food grain, all the produced from the earth. So annadam is also a source of fire for me, is it not? Because my fire in my belly, what is called Jatayagni, that needs the ahuti of food, is it not? And that food, like samhita, is also coming from the sun. The food is also coming from the sun, and that is what is reminded by Agnim and Nadam. So, in this Agni, I will be putting in some food grain as ahuti. And why I am doing that? Annadyadade. This is Chaturthi, what is called dative. Adadhe, I established this fire. So I established this fire on the surface of the earth. That has been the tradition by all the noble people prior to me. And this Agni, in a smaller sense, is reflecting the Agni of Om, Agni of Bhuh Bhuvah Svah, Agni of Dyom, and Agni of Prithivi. So all that is represented here, and I am very conscious about that. And within this Agni, I will be putting the Annadam because I want myself to become Annada. Annad is a very interesting term here. This is one who has the capacity to give Anna. So rather than saying, you give me a loaf of bread, what are we saying? May I become that I give away loaf of bread to others. You know, when you have the capacity to give away something to others, that means you have a huge stock of that thing, is it not? So in the Vedic prayer sense, like Om Annapate Annasya no Dehi Nami Vasyeshu Pepedatayam Taisha Ujam. You know, we are always, you are the Annapati, and then we are not saying you just give me Ann, you make me Annada, so that in your image I can also become a distributor, like your agent, that I also give away Anna, which is the source of life, Anna Prana. So I want to give it away to others. So we are saying Agni is Annada, and I look at this fire vessel, Agni Kund also as Annad, where I will be putting in the ahutis of Anna. And the purpose of that is finally that I become Annad myself. So due to this is the ecological cycle. So when I put in food grain into the fire, that is vaporized and air is strengthened, purified, and that gives rise to further growth of vegetation. So we are seeing this Om Bhuh Bhuvah Svah and the image of this functioning of the universe as the Yajman. Yajman is one who is conducting the yajna, that he is now putting the fire. That's what is stated here. You know, Om Bhuh Bhuvah Svah, इस मंत्र का उच्चारण करके ब्राह्मण क्षत्रिय व वैश्य के घर से अग्नि ला अथवा घृत का दीपक जला, उससे कपूर में लगा, किसी एक पात्र में धर, उसमें छोटी छोटी लकड़ी लगा के यजमान व पुरोहित उस पात्र को दोनों हाथों से उठा, यदि गर्म हो तो चिमटे से पकड़कर अगले मंत्र से अग्निया ध्यान करे. This was compound word Agni and Adhan. Adhan is to establish it. So what is being said is you kindle the fire or bring it from your neighbor or you generate it. Of course, nowadays for convenience we use a matchstick, but otherwise There can be other ways also. And then that little fire that you have generated is placed into the Agnihotra vessel, what is called Havan Kund. By reciting अगले मंत्र से आगे जाकर. As we recite this mantra, we place the tiny fire, which may be in camphor or maybe in a small samhita, whichever way it is, into the Havan Kund. And by now, Havan Kund has some samhitas. Then he is saying, इस मंत्र से वेदी के बीच में अग्नि को धर, उस पर छोटे छोटे काष्ठ और थोड़ा कपूर धर. Well, I had said that samhitas are placed here. That's what was said, samhita chayan vedi mein kayan. But here also, after some more samhitas may be placed or some camphor, so that the fire doesn't go away, doesn't extinguish. Then अगला मंत्र पढ़ के व्यजन से, I don't know what is it, maybe I see Vyajan is a hand moving fan, probably Sanskrit term. So with this mantra, one is, if it is needed, to give some support to the fire by waving the hand operated fan, something like this. That mantra is, let's take it up. Om Udbudhyasvagne Prithivi Tvamishta Pute Sam Sijetha Mayancha Asmin Sadhasthe Adyuttayasmin Vishve Deva Yajamanascha Sidata. So let's see, I made a comment here. Tvam Ishtapute. Ishtapute I was trying to show as a dipole, like Shanti and Swasti and Shanti. Or as in Sandhya we have Abhishtaye Pitaye. So this is a holistic sense of benefit that I expect from this Agnihotra. And here we are saying Pratijagayi. The fire is within the samhita and we want it to come out, in its full potential, so that my Agnihotra can be successful, well done. If fire is not at their full potential, then it cannot vaporize the various stuff that we will be putting in. So this is very important to understand. Just causing fire in the samhita is not Agnihotra. This is a base fire. This is the means. And as we know it, in its own manner, this is also contributor to carbon dioxide as such, which is not quite a pollutant, but in modern times because there is excessive amount of carbon dioxide because of our lifestyle, so much of industrial and activities are there that fuel is burned, a lot of excessive amount of carbon dioxide and other pollutants are formed. So carbon dioxide in very nascent, when human activity was not at such a large scale, was probably not a pollutant, but in modern times it is considered as one of the greenhouse gases. So somebody can object to our Agnihotra. But then we have to be careful that we do burn samhitas. So samhita is that fire is means whereby we want to vaporize substances like ghee and other herbal things. So merely burning the samhita is not our objective. The fire generated by the samhitas are utilized to cause certain chemistry and vaporization of the substances that will be added later. So we have to understand it. And that is why generally we see in Arya Samaj and people, they don't do Havan properly because they burn Samhita excessively, more than what is required. So in a very well performed Agnihotra, you will use a very minimum Samhitas to the extent that gives rise to the fire. So fire has some appetite, the size of the fire. And based on that, you have to know how much of herbal substances and ghee can be put in. Ghee is good in the sense it helps the fire sustain. So it has a dual purpose. It kinds of maintains the life of the fire, and also it acts as a ahuti substance because it is a very healthy thing, and its vaporized form is also good for our health. But then the other things that we are going to add that are more in solid phase, and we would expect that to be vaporized. Now that quantity should be very commensurate to the size of the fire. And when the fire has its lifetime, it is utilized to transform the herbal substances. So we will now look at this mantra from afresh when we meet next week. Thank you very much for your attention. We'll continue our discussion next week.